Welcome everyone to today's Flex webinar. I'm your host, Markus Merritt. Today we're going to be talking about the PO receiving and subrental return screens and process. Okay, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. So first thing I just want to talk a little briefly about what a lot of people find kind of funny in the system that everyone's noticed, that we have multiple kinds of POs within Flex. And what we're going to be talking about today is the reason for that. Why we have the redundant purchase order, purchase PO, and then also the separate rental PO. There's also a labor PO. We're not talking about that today, but technically it is because of the same thing. It's because there are different logistics for those different POs. And what I mean by that is there is a process designed for a purchase PO for you to be able to receive the gear into your system against that PO to save and capture that data against those items forever. Similarly, on a rental PO, there's the ability to receive that inventory in, to then scan it against your pull sheet to complete and get yourself to 100%, put it on your truck, have your manifest be accurate, bring it back from the show, and then kick it out of your inventory when you then return it to the vendor that you rented it from. And that's what we're going to be going over today. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the purchase order, okay, or PPO. I'm going to pop it open really quick. I pre-built this because we're not talking about how to build them. We're just talking about how to do the receiving process. But I want to highlight really quick that I said that I built myself a full kit. Now, maybe I wouldn't actually buy all of this from the same vendor, but I just need a couple examples to show a few of the different things. So I went ahead and built this completely here for that, okay? I've got in this, the key thing, this is serialized item. This is a serialized item, storage, and these are both non-serialized in my system. Okay, I want to be able to show those examples. Now, an important thing is, unlike a pull sheet or a manifest, when I go to scan, if I'm on the edit screen, which this one is, I can go over to the right side menu and pop open the scanning. But because this is still a financial document, I can't do that. I must go to the warehouse screen to then be able to receive this. So I know what my number is. I know what my name is. I've got my dates on it accurately. So I can go to my main menu, to warehouse, and I'm looking to do receiving right now. Now, an important thing, and you'll see this here, we're going to still talk about one at a time, but you see that for receiving, that works for both purchase POs and rental POs, okay? Both of those are receiving. Now, the system knows the difference if you're receiving subrental items or you're receiving main items by the resource type that is on them, okay? That's the key thing. So it can share that receiving screen, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and open our purchase PO, but I do wanna also highlight one other thing, is that there's workflows built into these with statuses. And you'll see it here, I made it so my purchase PO is approved, my rental is not. Technically, this process does not require or set itself to any specific status. You just kind of have to internally make sure you're watching that and only processing ones that are supposed to be processed, okay? I can process this tentative one. I will do it later. When I get to that, I'm not gonna run the workflow on it just to show that example of an understanding on that. So for this one that I know I need to receive, I have some of the physical items in here. I can then pop that open and I get my list. Now at this point, it looks very similar to a scanning screen. The same scanning screen if it was a prep sheet or if it was a manifest, a return, transfer, whatever thing, it looks very similar. But we process this differently, okay? The system knows in here that these are a purchase. And so rather than doing where I'm scanning an item, I'm gonna pick what I'm receiving. Now, this is an important thing where I can do this in the order that I want. And I'm gonna specifically show this because this is an improvement from the Flex 4 process, okay? Where I can say, maybe on this, they're waiting to get these from the manufacturer because I have a dealer that I do it, but they build these cases in-house for me, okay? And so they got me the cases first. And so I'm not ready to receive the rest of this. I'm only ready to receive the case, okay? Well, then I can double click and pop this open and you'll see here instead, rather than just scanning, it's going to give me a pop-up screen that's receiving. It's going to fill in the information that it knows, that relative thing. What was the purchase order it was on? What's the purchase date, which is going to default to be the day you're receiving, but I could override it if I was a little delayed and I actually physically got them yesterday and I want that to be accurate, right? And then it pulled that purchase cost from there, not pulling it from the assumed purchase cost, but pulling it directly from the purchase PO, okay? I didn't have a model number on this item. Then the key thing in here is the specific per unit, serial number, barcode, if I'm doing RFID, if I want a stencil, okay, on any of that, okay? I can go ahead and put those things in. I'm just gonna fake myself really quick here that I'm gonna let the system give myself a barcode so I can leave that one blank. And then this, if you are using printer through the system, you can tell this to say, hey, when I'm done, give me the ability to print my barcodes for that. For today, I'm not going to bother with that because I'm just trying to show the regular receiving process, and we're just going to kind of go through. So you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and add, and it's going to have added, you see it process that item in the back, but this stayed open, assuming I want to continue receiving this item, okay? And that's that big key difference. In the old system, you would kind of hit next and it would want to jump to the top of the list and work on the top of the list. And this one says, until you tell me otherwise, I'm going to assume we're still receiving this line, okay? That's what I'm going to keep going. You see it cleared the information that we know is unique. It left the information that is not. And we can go in here and then put in whatever other serial number and add our second unit, okay? So we're getting that, and we're seeing that we're getting our intake manifest where it's adding those items, it's giving them barcodes and adding them to the system, okay? Now I'm just gonna run through this a little quick for the rest of this. The key thing I wanna show is for these non-serialized items. So they get me 2 of these stands. When they're non-serialized, instead it's just gonna say, hey, how many of those did you get? It's not currently assuming that I got the full amount, so I just have to edit that to say, yep, I got 2. That's what I was hoping for. There I go. I can receive that. Same thing on these jumpers if I want. I can say, hey, I got 2 on this. And so then here on these other speakers, same as the other one, where I go in, it's pulling in all of this. This one has a model number properly in there. It's still pulling that purchase PO, the date, the purchase cost. I can go in and put that. But instead, for real quick, I'm just going to run through this as if I did it here and hit add. Okay. When any line is done, you see that it immediately pops out, says, hey, you don't need to receive that line anymore. So it does then cancel out, but it assumes I'm going to try to finish unless I want to hit cancel. And when I finished everything, it then pops up and saying, hey, do you want to finalize this? Are you done? I can then finalize, and that's going to update my status on this. If I was to reload here, now it's tagged as received, and those items are properly in my system and available for use, okay? And for the receiving process, that's it, we're done. That's all we really have to do, okay? Now, again, you would be making sure to actually get serial numbers because you have actual items, double checking the other accuracy on that, but it's fairly straightforward, okay? So now we're gonna talk about the rental process of receiving, scanning those in against it on the pull sheet, scanning back, scanning them out, okay? There's more steps to this on it, okay? So for this, we've got ourselves here, I'm gonna refresh this really quick. So we see that that one's saying it's received, it's done, and this here is going on, right? So first, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, hey, we need to receive this PO before I can go scan out my pull sheet. So in the same way, we have to go to the warehouse screen and to receiving. And same thing either way. Now a note here, because I finished receiving my purchase PO and it went to the received status, it is considered closed and properly filters off of this screen, okay? That should help keep this screen cleaner. Now, one thing to note on this, just as another check, it's gonna default, try to filter to proper locations of kind of your default scanning location on there, but that can be updated. And it's got a date expected filter. And so if for some reason you're receiving something late, receiving something early, you can update this filter and open up what's there. But the key thing I'm showing is that when it's completed, it's going to disappear, and that should help keep this clean. But if for some reason you're like, no, I still need to update it or something, you can say to include closed. We'll see I get that back. Okay, so that's that key thing there. I'm going to go ahead to receive my rental PO, and the process for this is going to be the same. It knows that it's receiving them differently, that they are subrentals, not purchases. So the numbers it gives them and the status or the type it gives them will be different, but my process is the same. I go in here to receive these items, I get my pop-up screen, I have the chance to put in more detail on this if I want, but it's not necessary on that because I'm temporarily adding this item. So I have the ability to put as much as I want, but it's less important, okay? In the same way, for the moment, I'm just gonna hit add and let these show up as these subrental items, okay? And I will pop over here to the subrental intake manifest where you'll see the default setup in the system uses the same numbering scheme, but it adds this sub in front of them to help you remember that this is a subrental item, okay? That's now in your inventory, okay? I can do the same on this non-serialized where I can say, yep, I needed to receive 2 of these in there, okay? And then I can finalize this as I've received these items against this rental PO, okay? They're now in my system. Now on this, I wanna do a quick double check on this. I'm gonna go back to here and open my pull sheet to the edit screen. And I just wanna show really quick on this. I'm gonna take and open my projector from this to show that you'll see here that in this, I say in my rental stock, I have 1 of these in my Las Vegas location, but in my Salt Lake City location, I now have 2, but they're in the subrental stock. Now, as subrentals in the default settings, they still count towards rental availability, but it categorizes them differently so you understand those aren't items you own, they're items you temporarily have in your system. Similarly, again here, they're in my system, these updated different barcodes. We know when I brought them in where they are, and we have an intention of removing them, but you do have to make sure to take care of that or your system will have availability concerns, okay? So I just want to kind of highlight that. So for this, I'm going to go to my pull sheet so that now I've received those items and I'm ready to scan them out. And on this, because it is an equipment list, I can just go here and say, I want to go to the prep screen. Okay, now again, scanning screen looks the same, but an important thing here, we see that I have this column of SR, of subrent, that it's reminding me, hey, I subrented things. And we'll see even if I hover over this, now normally you wouldn't rent from yourself, but I don't have a lot of context in this system, but it's saying who you rented them from. And that's especially important if for some reason you had to get the quantity, you had to rent 2 from here and 2 from there. And so you want to make sure you know which line is expecting which rental, right? Or maybe you had 2 different shows and to cover that, it came from 2 different companies. Well, on the availability, because those shows may have different lengths, you want to make sure you're knowing this one is planning from that company. So hovering over that will give me that data, okay? And then the next on this, relative to that, is that yes, I can do some kind of printed sticker and I can put it on that item and I could then scan it, okay? Because they do have a barcode. But the system knows I was planning to use those subrental items, so I can just go here and double click it as a virtual scan, and then it's gonna remind me, hey, you've got these subrental ones in your system from that planned vendor. Well, that's who I saw that they were supposed to come from. And so I can just say, yeah, go ahead and process those units. Okay, so I don't necessarily have to stick a barcode on them and have to then actually physically process them again. If I process them the first time, I can make some amount of assumptions. Okay, on this, because they're non-serialized, we're still going to say from here on that, and we can then finalize our rental. Okay, so then goes out the door, does whatever event, does whatever show, and then when it's done, it comes back. In this process, okay, and I just would make one kind of highlight that again, on my manifest, I have all the data here. That means I can print a manifest, it can be accurate, I can have proper weights, whatever things, especially if I have a lot of my gear and some of theirs, and I have to, go somewhere where someone really cares about the accuracy of that manifest, right? So when I'm done, in this, we're going to go back here and reload my calendar. Oh, I don't have it pulling the manifest on this calendar, so we'll just go here. I need to first go to my manifest and return these items, okay? You still have to make sure to return them before you return them to the vendor. So it does turn your 2-step scanning process into a 4-step scanning process. It was normally just in and or out and in. You now have to do in, out, okay? Keep that in mind. But there are some shortcuts, so you don't have to physically process them in every single step, okay? So on this, we're gonna open the manifest. I'm gonna go to the return screen, okay? Again, at this point, if these are rented, it's probably pretty easy to tell. I need to do a visual double check on that. The other thing is a lot of times if you rented multiples, maybe you didn't then stick a barcode on each one. So I don't really know which one of these, if I didn't bother to put in the serial number, which one of these is 153 and which is 152. What I'm really concerned is, did I get all of them back? Did I make sure to bring all of them back from my rental before I return them to my vendor? If I have 2 back, then I assume that's the correct 2 that both have my, that label from my vendor on here, okay? And so I can just manually process those and say, yep, this one came back. Yep, this one came back. And then same with my non-serialized and go ahead and process that. Okay, so now I've updated that accuracy, and the key on that is because if I remove them from my system, it's not going to let me return them, and this manifest is going to have problems saying it has unreturned items, but it won't let you return them because they aren't in your system anymore. It deletes them in that process. Okay, so we do want to make sure we do that first. Okay, then when you're done with this and you're ready, okay, I need to send my driver to go return that to the vendor. In the same way, I'm going to go to my main menu, to the warehouse, and now we are going to subrental returns. And as we've talked about in this process, this is only for the subrentals, okay, because those are the only ones that actually get kicked back out. The purchase POs just come in and they're done, okay? So we have in this the same one. We see though that this is technically referencing the subrental intake manifest, the list of gear that we brought in, okay? And in the same way, we just want to do kind of enough of a visual check if we have that other information. As a note, just to show if you're a person of higher permissions, you may have this availability to have this scan selected lines in and out, kind of a mass scan. If you again have visually double checked, yes, we got everything. I got the 2 cables. I got all of my projectors. Then I can run that and say, yep, go ahead and just process all of that real quick. It'll go ahead and run all of that. And then I can finalize. And with that, just real quick, I'm going to pop back over to my pull sheet. And I'm going to go again from here, just as the fast way to open my thing. Now we see I don't have any subrentals in. And when I click to my serial units, I just have the 1 unit. Okay, so they were temporarily part of my inventory, part of my system for the time it took for that show to take place so I could have accurate manifest, accurate paperwork. And then when I was done, when I returned them to my vendor, I get rid of them from my inventory so I don't suddenly think they're available for another show later, okay? The one biggest other thing that I just want to mention relative to this is that if you start to do this or have done this in the past, but you have people where you get busy and you have been bad about remembering to return. You liked bringing them in, double checking your accuracy on there, but you didn't make sure on the out to take care of that. And so you're getting availability issues, okay? You've just forgotten to clear up some of your old things. Now, one, you can just go in there and try to double check your statuses, but there's a report that I'm a really big fan of on this. So if we go in here to reports, and then what I want is the unreturned items report, okay? Now, the key thing on this is under default settings, if I run this right now, this is going to run against all of my manifests and try to check what have we not brought in that I need to go chase, whether it's, my rental customers, whether it's my own project managers and like what happened on these shows. But if I change this to say subrentals only, yes, now it's going to run against those subrental intake manifests and tell me what subrentals did we not bother to return to the vendor digitally. I've seen people where they're ready and they're smart and they're used to the process of getting and taking the gear back, but they forgot to digitally do it. And so you need to go back and digitally do it. Mine's going to end up blank because that's probably my only one and it's now returned. So I'm not going to actually run it. But that's that key thing is remember, if you do this unreturned items report, you change these subrentals into yes, then you'll see that subrental there. And with that, that is our process. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone who showed up for today. As always, if you have additional needs or questions, you can reach out to support@flexrentalsolutions.com or go to our help center at helpcenter.flexrentalsolutions, and please reach out to the training email at training@flexrentalsolutions.com if you have ideas for future webinars or more major questions or requests for additional direct training. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.